TellyCast, the TV industry news review.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to this week's TellyCast. We're taking a look at the Belgian TV industry this week, and joining me on the show is Dries Verhaeghe, one of the country's most senior and experienced TV producers. And K7 Media's Girts Licis is back, and he's looking at some of the shows that are making waves right now in the country, and some home-produced formats that are selling around the world. And Deadline's Peter White is back too, looking at the latest big US studio, revealing details of its planned big money entry into the battle of the streamers. It's all coming up on this week's TellyCast. We're now taking advertising bookings for our special MIPCOM Online Plus shows in October, where I'll be joined by a leading TV journalist every day of the market as we analyse the key news stories of the day. Plus, every day we'll interview a different leading distributor about their MIPCOM slate. If you're interested in sponsoring one of these shows, please email me on justin@boomdialogue.com. That's justin@boomdialogue.com. That address is also in the episode description. On with this week's show. And following last week's German special, we're hopping over the border and taking a look at the Belgian TV industry, one that's been making waves over the last few months as something of a format hotspot. I'm delighted to welcome one of the country's most experienced and senior producers, Dries Verhaeghe, to the show. Dries has been working in TV production in the Belgian industry for over 20 years, both at independent production companies such as TV Bastards, Media Land and Lecter Media, and also in-house at public broadcaster VRT. Dries has been executive producer in some of the world's biggest format adaptations in Belgium, including Love Island for RTL Netherlands SBS Belgium, Strictly Come Dancing and Celebrity Splash for VTM. Dries's other production credits include multiple series of Soap Star Superstar, Peter Live, and the pre-selection rounds for the Belgian entries for the Eurovision Song Contest. Welcome to the show, Dries.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Justin.
I'm delighted that you can spend some time with us. The Belgian TV industry seems to have been a hotbed of creativity in recent months, particularly, it seems, over lockdown. And Girts Licis from K7 Media seems to highlight a new show every other week from the country. So I'm keen to try and understand why a relatively small country right at the heart of Europe seems to be having something of a TV renaissance. But first of all, could you give us a little bit of an overview on the Belgian TV landscape? Because I'm aware it's fairly unique and it has distinctive regions. Can you take us through that and how the TV ecosystem is organized, if you like?
Okay, I'll try to be as clear as I can be. For Belgium is quite a strange country politically, and that has actually the same resonance in media. We have three regions. We have a German-speaking region, French-speaking region, Dutch-speaking region, which is called Flemish. These three all have a public broadcaster in their own language. So you have a German, you have a French, and you have Dutch-speaking public broadcaster. That's like for the public broadcasting. For the rest, I think I will concentrate on the north and the south. Not because I don't like the Germans or that we should not listen to what they have to say, but they're a very small market. It's 100,000 people. It's a very, very small area. I think they only have like the public broadcaster, and apart from that, all the German people watch the German channels.
Okay, we covered off Germany last week. Talk us through that north and south.
First of all, you have the language barriers. The south is French-speaking, the north is Dutch-speaking. That's a cultural and linguistic barrier, which resonates actually in you don't have crossovers, or you hardly have any crossovers. There's not like a channel that covers and Dutch and French speaking by crossovering from one language to another. So that's like the two distinctive markets are these ones. Talking about the South, which is the French-speaking part, I think if you could look at media concentration, about 25%, 30% of their audience, there are 4 million people, 25%, 30% of their audience will definitely watch the French television networks. So TF1, France 2, everything that is France-based and is broadcasting from France will be watched by, let's say, 25-30% of the French-speaking Belgians, which is not the same in the north. I'm 48 years old, so I was raised still with no commercial channel on the north side. We only had commercial television on the north side in Flanders from 1989. So prior to that, if we wanted to watch anything that, let's say, was a bit of entertainment, big shows, I would watch, and most Flemish people would watch the Dutch public broadcaster. But that changed overnight, actually, in 1989, because when the commercial channel started, and the biggest commercial channel on the north side is VTM, it's part of the DPG media group, is that all of a sudden we could have the shows that we were watching in the Netherlands, we had them in our own cultural environment. To compare it, I think that the north, there's only 2% of 3% of the north watching Dutch public broadcasters. So compared to the French speaking part, that's quite a difference. So the influence in the south of France is huge. I mean, really huge. If you have a French show like Top Chef, it's like a bake-off, but for chefs in France, you will always have Belgian contestants. Always. They will always include Belgian contestants, but French-speaking Belgians, to cover actually that market. So that's basically that's like the big difference. Due to that, in the south, so in Wallonia, you will have less native Belgian French-speaking production, which is completely different for the north. The north has lots of local native production.
Okay. So if I have a TV format and I'm going to sell it into the Belgian market, would I find, for example, in the north, that if I have a Dutch broadcaster has acquired the format and going to be remaking it, would the Dutch-speaking Belgian sector, if you like, would they remake it for that small audience, or would it just be a case of that audience would watch the Dutch broadcaster's version of The Voice or whatever it might be?
No, the north, the Flemish audience will always like more their own cultural products. So we have The Voice of Flanders, it's even called like that, and we have The Voice Belgique. The Voice Belgique is the French-speaking part, but they don't have the same budgets. You can see that immediately. They don't have the same budget. The north has a bigger budget than the south. It's a bit like if we watch The Voice in the UK, it's like a huge markup in set design and everything. It's just like, it's a big market, the UK. So you see that in different layers of the production. The two versions of The Voice in Belgium, they look the same. I mean, it's still the chairs turning around. It's the coaches, and it's the same format, but in the production value, you will find differences.
What about the production sector in Belgium? How is that organized?
It's organized mostly in the north in a way that the Dutch-speaking part has a vast production area and lots of companies. I think there's about 68 production companies in the north, mostly producing for the Dutch-speaking part. There's only like the bigger ones like Endemol Shine, which is now going to be Zodiac or Banijay, and Fremantle. They will also have the productions on the south side, but that's about it. There's not a lot of Dutch-speaking production companies producing for the south.
Presumably, you mentioned the super indies, and obviously will no doubt have a presence there. But what about the true indie sector? There presumably are 3 or 4 big companies that are making multiple productions.
Yeah, and which is, in my personal opinion, way too much. Economically, I think 68 or 70 production companies in a small production area of Flanders with 6 million people is too much. Your talent is too divided over small companies, and you don't have that added value of having a bigger company where creative people can hop from one production to another one. I think what I would say personally, again, I think that is something worth mentioning, but also something of a negative part. And mainly, I think, because I see that whenever some creative has grown into the production world, I tend to think that everybody wants to start its own company in Flanders, which is reflected in the masters of production companies that we have. It's a huge freelance market now, where it wasn't like that 15 years ago. Production companies would have employees employed that hop from one production to another one. That is only for the bigger ones now, which is quite a challenge if you go talent hunting, because, well, it's a freelance market. So if you have a new production, you would have to make sure that you get the right man for the right job. And that is not always easy, because most of them are busy with another production, and then you have to wait. And you know that not all channels can wait. You got production companies of 3 people.
Yeah.
Not kidding. 2 people, 3 people. And they will have a production, but they will have 1 production or 2 productions. That's it.
Do you think that's likely to change with the situation now where COVID has really changed the game for many smaller production companies? Presumably, the Belgian production market has been impacted in the same way that many other territories, certainly in the UK, production has been really impacted.
I think it's going to be impacted quite heavily. And that's the streaming war that is going on. And so there's less money for the classic linear broadcasters to do productions. There's less income from advertising. I think the coming months and years going to be very challenging for lots of production companies in the north. I wouldn't be surprised if by this time next year, 5-6 companies have gone bankrupt.
It's a fairly bleak outlook in some areas. I mean, maybe we might see some of these smaller companies banding together.
I personally think that would be a very good idea, actually, because you do brainstorms and you brainstorm about new formats or new things that you want to get going. If you have to do that on your own, that's quite lonely, and you don't have like feedback. And if you combine that, you get just a better result. I would hope that this crisis will bring bright minds together. So I think that we have been diverging, and now we should be converging again.
We're seeing lots of new shows coming through, particularly through COVID. Creative formats coming through in Belgium. The Container Cup is one that springs to mind, but there's Girts Licis has mentioned many others over the past few weeks. Why do you think that is? Why are we seeing such creativity bursting through in Belgium?
I don't think that Belgium is more creative than any other media business in the world. I think that's simply not true.
Okay.
What is different is that the area that you have to work in is extremely small. I mean, we're talking about 6 million people in the north, which is not even London. We're such a small language area. Our audience likes local content. They want local content. Any local content will do better than acquired international formats, or any local content will most of the time do better.
Oh, really? You find locally produced content outperforming the likes of The Voice or the likes of Got Talent, for example?
They will watch Britain's Got Talent on the second commercial channel of DPG Media.
Yeah.
They will watch it, but the numbers, the ratings will be, not even a tenth of what the regular show on the main channel will be with local stars.
Okay.
It is extremely local driven business. And I think that in combination with the fact that you don't have big budgets over here. If I tell you that the biggest production I've done, and I've done some, was 3 million euros for 10 episodes. If you compare that to UK standards, that's not that big.
Yeah.
But I think given the fact that we have to work with less financial resources, makes us more creative in coming up with new ideas that fit that little small market. And I must say, but that's also, maybe that's a bit personal, but I think that in Flanders, they are really they like a typical kind of TV atmosphere. I teach television on the film school, and when I was talking about formats, and if you look to the international formats, if you look to a format like the slimste mens ter wereld, which is, if you would translate it, the smartest man in the world, it's a long-running format that first was on the public broadcaster and now is on the commercial broadcaster. Extremely popular, but like ratings that would pop up in any international boardroom, like, okay, what's that? Oh, fuck, what's that? But if you explain that to students and you say, like, the difficulty of that format traveling abroad is that how do you explain to an American audience that the final is played with the two contestants that didn't win?
Right.
It's like any American executive will say, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. A final has to be with the brightest minds. No, but this one is different. So, and that, I think in that gives a slightly idea of what our audience is. We love underdogs. The winner of The Voice is not necessarily going to be the most popular candidate. We always like the underdogs. In talent show, that has always been like a bit of a, I don't know, it's really weird.
Do you see international formats being adapted to suit that underdog appetite, if you like, in Belgium?
No. But the result is sometimes that if we also had the franchise of Idols in Belgium in the north, and one of the most popular Flemish artists right now became second in that show. She didn't win, but she came second. Not the same in the south. The south loves winners, but like real winners. But in Flanders, I don't know, in talent shows, they love the underdogs.
Interesting. And perhaps the constraints of COVID have really seen many Belgian producers playing to their strengths.
Yes, maybe they have less difficulties with adapting to even lower budgets, like even more lower budgets than they were before. They are able to adapt and to find ways to service that.
So it's the time in the show, Dries, where we get to look at your TV stories of the week and what's making the TV news in the Belgian industry right now. So the first one you've chosen is about a new SVOD channel.
Yeah, it wouldn't be extraordinary launching a new SVOD platform, but this one is a collaboration actually between the two rivalry commercial channels. They both own parts of that streaming service. And the public broadcaster is a bit out right now, but still they hope Streamz, as the name is, they didn't look that far for that name, I think.
No, but it has got a Z in it, right?
It has got a Z, yeah. It should become like the three main North media groups, so Flanders, working together on an SVOD platform. What I personally think, it's too late. That's my personal opinion. I think because it's mainly gonna air local drama series, so Flemish speaking drama series, so locally produced. But we know that producing local drama series, it is expensive. But if we have a couple of them every year, that will be it. And I think it's quite difficult to fill any library with a couple of drama series a year if you're used to your Netflix or Amazon or HBO Max or Disney Plus library. So I'm really curious, in a way, how that will be popular. Of course, they ask money for, as a subscription. I'm really curious to see how this will play out. It comes down to any household to ask, okay, you have already your Disney Plus and your Netflix, so why not take another one, Streamz, as another subscription to the subscriptions family households already have. So I'm really, really curious to see how this will play out. They advertise they have a library of 1,000 titles, which is quite, I'm really curious to see the whole list of those 1,000 titles, because that will need most definitely the titles of the public broadcaster, because the public broadcaster has much more library of locally produced drama series. So I'm really curious to see how this will play out, because it is in a competition of Netflix, Disney Plus world, and also that comes with the quality of those series that you see on those streaming platforms. in a way, it's good because it might up the game of drama series locally produced in Belgium. But then again, you'll never have those budgets of the Netflix blockbusters.
You need a tentpole series like The Crown or The Mandalorian or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how that rolls out. Has that launched yet, or it's about to launch?
Yeah, it launched. Yeah, on Monday.
Okay. And what's the subscription out of interest?
It's €11.95 a month.
Interesting. Well, I think that's a brave move, but maybe it's something that's been planned for a long time. It's just taken a long time to come to fruition. Your second news story is about a sexting scandal in the TV industry in Belgium.
Yeah, well, not particularly because the sexting scandal, but it gives you a very, very good idea of how different this country looks to things in the south and in the north. It's sex videos of three famous male hosts of the north, for the Flemish-speaking part. What is interesting about it is two things, actually. First of all, the videos were shared on WhatsApp and social media for a week already, and no network, no news medium picked it up. Well, even though everybody knew that it was going around, but it was like, it felt a little bit like a cover-up, so we're not going to talk about it. But after a week, as the spreading of those videos went way too far in a way that kids were seeing it, and you had like the Minister of Media had to point out that you couldn't share those things because it was private things and you didn't have consent and blah, blah, blah. But the one thing that struck me was that it was there for a week and no news channel, not on any of the news channels, were talking about it. No newspaper was talking about it. And I think that it was probably because of they were implicated in it. It was their stars. I mean, the stars of those networks. So it felt a bit like protective. And then on the other side, I live in Brussels and my partner is French speaking. So we hardly watch any Dutch speaking news. So when we watched it, we didn't know. I only heard of it like last Friday. And I was like surprised in a way. But then again, it gives you a very fair point of how divided our cultural systems are. Nobody was talking about that in the South. Nobody.
Maybe that sort of goes to show how important talent is to these media groups in Flanders, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In the French-speaking part, whenever they get a star coming up, eventually they will go to France. Belgium is like the step up for them to the bigger market, which is France for them.
Yeah. Oh, well. Well, that's, again, the value and the rising value of talent to media. That's an interesting point. And actually talking about talent, that brings us on to your final news story this week.
Yeah, the global talent brand of the Kardashians, who announced recently that the 14th season will be their last season. And so they quit Keeping Up with the Kardashians as a TV show. It's light entertainment. It's we all love to watch it. But what I liked about it, about the news, is that it is actually clear that the Kardashian clan doesn't need television anymore. And that is quite interesting. I mean, they live of the likes of social media now, and especially Instagram. If you know that they have combined 600 million followers, talking about business and financial business, that is the business for them now. So TV is not their business anymore. And that, I think, is partly one of the reasons why they stop doing the TV show. They don't need it anymore.
So once again, it's that time of the week when we look at the hero of the week for our guest. Dries, who's your hero of the week?
Maybe it's going to be a bit surprising, but my hero of the week is Larry Ellison.
Right.
He could also be the villain of the week. But actually, as he won the bidding war on the takeover of TikTok in the US from Bill Gates, the old narcissistic Larry Ellison got what he wanted. First of all, I think he wanted to win from Bill Gates. It's interesting in different ways. It's interesting to see that two of those moguls were bidding for TikTok, and it only emphasizes the brand value of TikTok right now. Larry Ellison is Oracle, Bill Gates is Microsoft. So it gives you an idea of in what order of game these social media applications have gotten into in a very short time. Yeah. I mean, let's face it, TikTok is not around since decades. It's a very, very, very young brand. And if you see that such amounts of money are paid for only the American, because we're talking only about the American TikTok takeover, it's quite interesting. It's still like two men fighting over a bone.
Yes.
It's like, I want to win. Yes. I want to win. No, I want to win. I don't want him to win. He has got all the attention of the corona vaccines, and I got nothing. So I want TikTok. So it felt a little bit like that.
And it's a very valuable young audience. And obviously there's political ramifications for this as well as we move into the election cycle in the US as well. So there's lots of interesting aspects of that story. Okay, and who are you going to put in the bin, Dries?
It's going to be Vladimir Putin.
That's very brave of you.
The reason why I want to put him in the bin is that he was having a nice chat yesterday with the Belarusian president who allegedly frauded his re-election. He was talking, it was an interview, and they were talking together, and it was like a supportive interview. It's like, we support you. And that image is, for me, everything that has gone wrong probably in the broad political world is like, who does believe anything what that guy is saying? Nobody does anymore. But still, everything gets broadcast. What he says, the support he gives to a dictator. We've learned to live with political leaders that are, well, lies probably quite often. And that counts for the US. It counts for the UK if we look at the Brexit period. Yeah. And it accounts for Vladimir Putin for sure. The last couple of weeks again with the Navalny scandal, and so I put Vladimir Putin. Not that he will be threatened by this that I put him in the bin, but. Vladimir Putin can be in the bin for me.
Yeah, all right. And I suppose it also underlines the importance of these independent news organizations, public service broadcasters, freedom and remit to tell the truth. And I think, that's going to be interesting. In the rise of social media, in the rise of paid media and channels and influence, then, public service broadcasting and independent news is really going to be as important as ever. Dries, thank you so much for taking the time to come on telling us about Belgium. Fascinating. I really didn't realize the extent of that divide between Flanders and Wallonia. And I hope to meet you in person very soon.
My pleasure, Justin.
So now it's the time of the show where we get to go over to Hollywood again and speak to Peter White from Deadline Hollywood. Peter, we've missed you. How are you doing?
I'm good, Justin. How are you? I've just been avoiding the wildfires, if I'm honest, skirting danger out here on the West Coast.
Are they quite close? Are they encroaching on the city?
There's a few that are not too far away. I think more than the danger of my place burning down is the fact that the air quality is something akin to sort of Burning Man, and the sky sort of looks like Tatooine. It's pretty apocalyptic, but I guess it's the end of the world, so it sort of seems pretty apt.
So welcome to Hollywood.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
it's great to have you back on the show. So there's obviously the big news story of today and of this week is Viacom CBS finally unveiling their new streamer.
Exactly, Paramount Plus. Well, we sort of get on these calls every few weeks, Justin, to talk about who's launching a new streamer. And I guess Viacom CBS was one of the last big ones to do it. They had CBS All Access, which is their streamer, which has got a lot of original content as well as the sort of catch-up service. But no, this was their big play. They've been talking about it for a while. They just didn't name it. But I guess the big news is what shows are actually going to launch on it. That's sort of the big thing. There's no Anna Kendrick originals, which seems to be what most of these things launch with. But I guess that the biggest one is a sort of Godfather show. It's not quite a prequel or a remake. It's a limited drama about the making of. It tells the sort of the story of how they actually got the Godfather off the ground, which by all accounts was quite a story in itself. This one's based on Al Ruddy, who was the producer, sort of one of the key figures, along with Coppola and Bob Evans and Mary Puzo. So it's a 10-part series written by Michael Tolkien, who wrote The Player. He also did Escape at Dannemora, the recent Showtime series. So that's really it's called The Offer, and that's sort of one of their leading shows. I think that's that's got the headlines. That's given us all the opportunity to use a classic Godfather picture in all of our stories. That's pretty sexy. They've got a couple of other things. They've got a Taylor Sheridan drama. He's the guy who co-created Yellowstone, the Kevin Costner show. That's called Lioness. It's a sort of CIA thriller. And I like a rock doc, Justin. They're bringing back Behind the Music. They're calling it MTV's Behind the Music this time, rather than VH1's, but a sort of sordid look at rock and roll tales, which could be quite interesting. I don't know who they're going to be profiling. They haven't quite said that, but they're sort of going to go through the vault and see what they've got and see what they can turn into some rock docs. So hopefully there'll be some fun in there for me. On those Behind the Music things.
I mean, the first thing that I thought when I saw the trailer launched earlier on was the name. I mean, it's interesting. They've gone, isn't it, with Paramount Plus. I wonder how deep in the public's consciousness Paramount is as a brand.
Yeah, it's interesting. They addressed that today. There was a session with a few CBS All Access Viacom CBS execs. Yes, they were sort of asked, why didn't you use the CBS name, given that it is the leading broadcaster in America? Even though network television isn't as sexy, it still reaches the most people. It's the most watched. So I think from their point of view, I mean, look, I think there's some internal politics at play. I imagine there's that, but I think they see it as a name that sort of has this old Hollywood to it, and they want to differentiate that between the broadcast network. So that's their thinking. They think Paramount, and maybe internationally that's true. Maybe Paramount has more play outside of the States than CBS. I think that's probably true, and they obviously want to try and pick up viewers and subscribers outside of the States. I think that was noticeable today when they sort of talked. They were rebranding in the Nordics and Australia and Latin America, and then there'll be markets which they'll be keen to launch in, which they haven't done, in the UK being the obvious one, when they can, as and when some of those content deals with the likes of Sky come up. The other thing they were asked about or sort of joked about was the plus. It's sort of almost become the thing to have at the end of your name. Disney,
yes,
Paramount Plus, and actually, I was a cynic saying they couldn't really think of a name, but actually, people are starting to see that as it means streaming, and I think that it's sort of smart. It differentiates it from maybe the Paramount Channel and the Paramount Studio. Doesn't necessarily breed confidence they couldn't come up with something better, but I guess people will know what it is.
Huge catalogue, really, really varied catalogue as well. I am actually surprised that they've gone with that, and they couldn't think of maybe a stronger new consumer brand to compete with the likes of HBO Max and Netflix and Amazon Prime and all the other streamers that they're going to be going into battle with. Yeah,
the naming is really interesting. I mean, you look what NBC Universal called theirs Peacock. I don't think many people outside of the business know what that is. So that's and then similarly, HBO Max is caused all sorts of issues because it's more than HBO. HBO stands for a certain thing. This is essentially Warner Media Plus. So I think the naming of it is really fascinating. I hazard a guess that down the line some of these might change. Hollywood and television and entertainment loves a rebrand, but yeah, that's one of the tricky things that these guys have to do. But as you say there with the catalogue, I mean, they have all sorts. They're going to have all the Nickelodeon shows. They're going to have MTV content. They're not going to have Showtime shows, which is interesting. They're keeping that one separate for the time being.
Right.
will be true in the future, I don't know. Another sort of premium scripted series will still live on Showtime. But yeah, naming rights is important.
Have they announced a rollout date?
Early 2021.
And presumably that's going to be the US first and then international later, or is that going to be global, do you think?
I think that'll be in the US, and then I think it'll be in those markets that I mentioned that they're sort of already in many places, and then I think they'll sort of move into the next stage is getting that elsewhere. David Lin, who heads up the international business, is going to be charged with that. I think you'll see it in the Nordics and Latin America and Australia, and then you might start seeing it in other parts of Europe.
And presumably they've not announced pricing strategy because it's purely subscription, isn't it? There's no different tiers like Peacock.
Well, CBS has tiers-ish. There's a slightly cheaper tier if you will put up with a few adverts. But no, they haven't announced pricing. I wonder whether they'll keep it similar to CBS All Access, whether they'll increase it. They might. But then all of these, I bought a Stars subscription the other day that cost me $1.99 for 3 months. So I think pricing is obviously a big issue. People are bundling. They're going to be bringing these things together. I think there was news today on Apple bringing a number of its subscription services under a bundle. I think that will, Showtime and CBS All Access is already available as a bundle. So whether you get these for one price, I think pricing is still sort of key, but it's being figured out.
And distribution, as you say, is absolutely key. And this one thing is for sure, next year is going to be a complete fist fight between all of these streamers. By that point, everybody will have launched, or all the majors pretty much will have launched, won't they? So we'll be able to stand back and see who's standing by what, I don't know, 18 months after launch. I mean, let's see who's still standing, right?
I think distribution is really interesting. I don't know if I paid too much attention to it before I moved here, and then I was buying a new TV setup, and I've got an LG TV fresh off the truck. I've got an Amazon Fire Stick. And I was loading all up my apps. I was, getting all my subscriptions going. And then it turns out that I can't actually get HBO Max on either of them. We were a bit annoyed. We couldn't watch Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. We had to sort of watch it on the iPad, which, isn't ideal when you bought a 60-inch TV. But it's interesting. That's going to have to change. I think it's the same thing we've seen in other markets. Punters don't really care about the internal machinations of these deals. They just want to be able to watch it. And if you aren't able to, you're going to go to something else.
And it's important that, as you say, the TV manufacturers, it's something that we've never covered on TellyCast before, is, the importance of that distribution through built-in apps in TV sets.
All of the other apps that I have, Peacock and Showtime and Stars and HBO, apart from HBO, are all on that TV. And HBO is missing. So, we've watched a lot of stuff, as you can imagine, over the last week, and it's not been in the Warner Media world.
Interesting stuff. Well, maybe we'll rebrand as TellyCast Plus and see if we can get some more subscribers over the next few weeks. But fascinating to hear about that. Do let us know any other developments that come through on that. And obviously, as you do on any other news from Hollywood in the weeks ahead.
Always, Justin. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Cheers.
And now it's that time of the show where we get to welcome back Girts Licis from K7 Media. Girts, we've missed you. How are you doing?
Thank you. Very well. Enjoying some really nice Nordic sun in Copenhagen currently.
Copenhagen. All right. You're out of Riga and you're on your travels across Europe.
Yes, I'm slowly approaching London, where I should arrive later today as well.
This has been promised and rumoured for a long time. So I'm going to be watching the Sky Scanner apps and waiting for seeing your flight descending. Well, it'd be good to have you in the country, albeit briefly. But
thank you. And I think it will go. Probably the flight path will go over Belgium. Yes, it's very likely.
Yes, which is a brilliant segue into obviously what we're talking about this week. And actually, this is inspired by you, Girts, the fact that we're looking at Belgium over the last
blame me if you want, okay.
Over the last few weeks, every time you've been reporting on interesting formats and interesting developments in the TV industry, you've always seemed to come back to Belgium and highlight what is coming through, particularly on the creative programming side. Love to hear about what you think about Belgium and going into it in a little bit more detail.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. I find Belgium a super interesting country. And though I'm still not quite sure what specifically has triggered this recent creative success, but I think it's a combination of a number of factors, probably. Belgium is a small place, but very diverse in terms of people who live there, and it's surrounded by all these big nations like UK, France, and in TV terms, I would also definitely add the Netherlands to this category. And since Belgians have always been known for having a strong appeal of foreign programming, I guess they have been also smart enough to learn the best, not only from its neighbors, but also from further afield. In politics and in business as well, there is a term, the Belgian compromise. Perhaps it has even something to do why Belgium houses the main EU institutions, as this nation is famous for being very skilled but also sympathetic negotiators with a very flexible approach to forging win-win deals. And the whole point of it is that it may not always be the ideal solution, but always everyone comes out of it with a reputation and pride intact. And I guess that this same art of compromising and serving everyone equally well has been further polished locally by trying to manage two very different linguistic spheres of the country itself. The Dutch-speaking Flanders region in the north, which makes up about 60% of the total population, and the French-speaking region of Wallonia in the south with about 40%. Each of these regions possesses also a very distinct visual culture with distinct tones to broadcasts. The Flanders, for instance, tend to possess more original and digital programming compared to Wallonia. And these communities, in fact, share little overlapping interest in the other shows. That said, though, there are some cases when a show or a format which has brought success to a broadcaster serving one part of the population then gets adapted by the other as well. Just recently, for instance, an escape room format, The Way Out, which sees two celebrity duos compete to be the fastest to solve clues and find their way out of separate identical rooms, has been commissioned for a French language version on RTBF after a successful first season on the Dutch-speaking channel BTM. And the second season of the Dutch version just launched last week with a super strong 38% share of the 18 to 44 demographic, an impressive increase of more than 75% against the channel's slot average. And this format is distributed by B Entertainment. So I think that all this complexity and working on finding ways to be good for everyone might be also one of the factors why formats created in Belgium have this flexible and universal voice that makes them very well suited for traveling internationally. And on the other hand, it also is a very smart approach to distribution business, in my opinion. There are few industry professionals leading this way who have spent many years gaining experience with some of the biggest international distribution houses before recently deciding to focus on pretty much Belgian content exclusively. And there's a bit of that sense of a mission, which I think also adds to their enthusiasm, as they claim that smaller markets may represent a perfect breeding ground for format developers to test new ideas. And I think that there is a certain breed of creators, particularly those representing more independent voices, who particularly appreciate this more personal approach, the passion and often a higher degree of agility, that can be offered by a smaller but well-connected and more targeted distributor. And many creators find it more important than the deeper pockets, but perhaps less attentive collaboration that many of them have experienced with more global players.
So which shows are the most popular amongst Belgian audiences?
If you're looking at the ratings of the linear broadcasters, the top performer in August was a long-running Flemish sitcom chronicling the misadventures of a fictional local football team called, in English, FC The Champions. It was on air for more than 20 years, since 1990s, and the reruns this summer still have been gathering very impressive audiences. I would guess that it's also partly due to the current COVID situation, since the show also provides that needed dose of escapism and nostalgia, reminding of some time in the past when the grass was greener, so to speak. Belgians also like quiz, and the most popular of them recently has been the Dutch format Switch. It is a simple, fun-filled daily show in which the same contestants get the chance to participate in all episodes of that week, if they're lucky, of course. They do not need to earn points. Instead, they switch positions depending on whether their answer is right or wrong. And at the end of each round, the contestant furthest to the right drops out. And also, Belgians have they are big fans of the soap. Sarah, which is a local adaptation of the Colombian format, which is best known for its US version, Ugly Betty. So, apart from news and sports, the trend there is clear. It's a light-hearted, fun family viewing that gathers the largest audiences. And if we are looking at a broader timeline, similar to Brits, Belgians love their local long-running soap opera. Their number one soap is called At Home in English and runs since 1995. Another similarity with British audiences perhaps is the love of comedy panel shows, with several new comedy panels premiering this fall season as well. And Belgians also are enjoying reality, The Mole in particular, and perhaps not everybody knows that this reality format also originated in Belgium back in 1998. Distributed by New Flemish Primitives, has been sold to almost 20 territories since then. Players in the mall must work together to complete different physical and mental challenges to build up a significant prize for the winner, while attempting to guess who might be the saboteur hired by producers among them. But then Belgians are also known for strong factual ideas. And like I have mentioned already before on the podcast, one of their newest formats, Emergency Call, which immerses viewers into the world of the super demanding job of call takers of the emergency call center, became the second most sold format internationally last year with 10 sales, less only than the entertainment phenomenon The Masked Singer, which actually sees its Belgian premiere on VTM this week. And speaking of creativity, the highly anticipated second season of hit Dutch-Belgium co-pro drama Undercover kicked off last week as well. Inspired by real events, this first series followed two undercover agents' attempts to infiltrate into a drug ring. And now Bauman, the criminal boss, is out for revenge. The premiere followed an innovative, immersive lead-up involving fans in the storyline. Drug lord Ferry Bowman himself reached out to fans who had participated in a competition a week earlier via a text message asking them for tips on how to reveal the true identities of investigators. And viewers who responded then received a call from the drug kingpin himself. The new season of this show will be available internationally on Netflix in November, by the way.
So how's the situation with streaming? Is Belgium also the battlefield that many other countries are for this global and against local streamers?
Yes, definitely. The situation is pretty similar to the rest of the Europe, where the globals kind of marched in without a real battle, and now the locals are trying to catch up and regain some ground. Netflix has also turned to Belgian originals. The first Belgian original series, Into the Night, landed on Netflix this May. And interestingly, it was quite dystopian, which some may think would be not the best fit for COVID peak times, which I actually disagree, but that's another story. So Into the Night, which was inspired by a Polish sci-fi novel, was a six-parter set in an apocalyptic Earth threatened by the sun, which inexplicably kills everything it touches. And the show joins a diverse group of passengers on board of a night flight from Brussels as they try to outrace and survive the deadly sun and also each other. It must have been performed well enough for the platform since it's already renewed for another season. Now, speaking of outracing, just this week, the Liberty Global-owned Belgian cable operator Telenet is launching a new streaming service in partnership with DPG Media called Streamz. And this service is going to have both Flemish language and international content, and is basically intended to become the local alternative to their global platforms. However, the management already is not concealing a bigger ambition of bringing to their viewers local stories with the potential to conquer the rest of the world as well.
Interesting that Dries was mentioning Streamz earlier on in the podcast. He was thinking, maybe it's launching a little bit too late, and maybe its content lineup isn't really strong enough for the local market. But it's going to be interesting to see how that one develops.
Yes, absolutely. And it also needs to be noted that in Belgium, we are seeing also an increasing trend of collaboration between different partners, which would some time ago be regarded as fierce competitors. And with the uncertainty COVID has brought to financial investments into big budget new productions, it's obvious that sharing risk becomes increasingly appealing. So it has been recently announced, for instance, that Netflix is working together with Channel Deer on a production of a new drama series called Soil, which tells the story of a family that begins bringing soil over from Morocco to help local Muslim families faced with the dilemma of deciding whether to bury their dead in Belgium or honoring their last wishes and taking them back to where they were born. And this series will premiere on the air, will be available on Netflix worldwide 6 months after the air date of the last episode. But then it has also been mentioned that it will be also available on Telenet in Belgium as well.
Interesting. Again, what we hearing from Dries is there's often a practical and creative way of solving problems and bringing solutions to often smaller budgets in the Belgian market. So perhaps that's also something that's been fueling this creativity that we've seen over the last 6 months particularly.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Interesting. Well, as ever, fascinating look at the Belgian market there. Girts, thank you so much for that. Have a safe trip to London and a safe trip back to Riga, and look forward to catching up next week. Well, that's it for another week's show. Thanks as always for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to rate and subscribe to the show and share it with friends and colleagues on social media. If you want to hear more about our MIPCOM advertising and sponsorship packages, please email justin@boomdialogue.com. That's justin@boomdialogue.com. TellyCast was edited by Ian Chambers. We'll be back next week with more insight and opinion. Until then, as always, stay safe.